Right in front of you now, getting airborne, the WHA 64D. It's actually out of the Westlands, they just used the 64 designation. More about the Apache to come later, but look, tailing it is an aircraft certainly some senior members may recall. If you watched films like Who Dares Wins, then you'll know that this had quite a long connection, not just with the British Army, but of course many elements of the Special Forces as well. It's an incredibly robust machine, the Scout helicopter. We're going to see that solo later on as well. But right now you're spanning a generation, as we mentioned, right at the introduction to this, of around about 50 years.
Keep his eyes out the window.
Okay, while he's doing that, of course, Matt Roberts, who is a veteran Army Air Corps pilot, and he is also still currently a reservist, interestingly enough, was an attack helicopter pilot, did fly the Apache himself, so I know there's going to be a big smile on his face because he knows many of the current Apache crews at Watersham as well. So we're going to come down into the hover now, a really good opportunity for some close-up shots of these, this really unique formation. I'm a huge fan, actually, of air shows in the UK of putting dissimilar formations in the sky. It really brings across developments in technology and, of course, the daring do. I mean, the Apache is literally littered with all sorts of electronic devices, but the one alongside it, the Scout helicopter, nothing but the pilot's eyeballs. And now, you want to tell us a little bit about the rest of what the Apache might have? I know you've got a display to come here.
I do have a display to come, and actually just mentioned about these dissimilar type displays. Just a couple of weeks ago in Berlin, the Apache featured what I'd like to think is a very unique flypast, where it flew a circuit at Berlin with a Hind from the Czech Air Force, which made for a very unique sight indeed.
Well, absolutely right. So you've seen now in rearward transition, the Apache will be just returning to hold whilst Matt Roberts in the Scout will just show you the paces of this venerable old lady. A bit more powerful, of course, than the Scout, than the Sioux helicopter that sadly was not able to start a moment ago. But and it gives us wonderful, very deep sound. This is the Rolls-Royce Nimbus engine that you're listening to now, not the more uprated Rolls-Royce engines of the Apache helicopter. This design you look at, that was designed in the early 60s, around about 60-61, under a company called Saunders Roe, and it's a famous name in aviation. It was eventually bought out by Westland Helicopters. Now entering into the standard pirouette, you see with many rotary machines doing this, it does require a great deal of agility, unsurprisingly, because as you're going through the pirouette maneuver, then you are at the same time having to adjust for all the wind drift that is going on as well. And therefore, there's a fair amount of footwork as well as handiwork going on the control column itself. But all this phase, of course, the pilot in this helicopter is solo, so he's got to keep an eye on all the T's and P's, as we call them in the business. So there's a fair amount of dexterity, but Matt Roberts, huge amount of experience on this. He's got about 4,000 hours now, and he started as an air crewman in the Army Air Corps, as many of our pilots do. And in fact, unique in Army aviation, unlike the other two services, we actively encourage soldiers to apply for positions for training as a pilot. Now, and you no doubt hear a little bit more about that as well during the Apache display, but it's one of the things the British Army is very proud about, that it is all-inclusive in that respect. And it will often take soldiers who are absolutely no past background in aviation whatsoever, and will turn them into a frontline pilot. And it's amazing what a life-changing experience this can be. Now, the aircraft itself went into service in 1963, and this particular example, it remains exactly the same as it was purchased, and has not changed whatsoever. There's one slight bit of technological advance in there, which is what we call a Mode S transponder, and that's a sort of C and D scene radar-derived piece of technology. But other than that, it's exactly as it was. The only thing we haven't got on it today are the examples of the SS-11 missiles that it would have used in the anti-tank role. And that was derived essentially to develop things you may well have heard of an expression called hell arm, when we were preparing for the hordes of Russian tanks to come across the mighty German plains. And I'm delighted to say that this may well have played a part in preventing that sort of scenario happening. Now Matt would have spent a good 1,500 hours or so of his 4,000 on this particular machine, not just in Germany, but of course in Northern Ireland, where it was used not just in the communications role, but of course in terms of counter-terrorist work and surveillance work. Very, very busy all the time during those difficult years across the water. As well as that, it featured heavily in the Falklands campaign in 1982 and was used heavily in the Kazibek role, with many army pilots at the time receiving awards for the incredible work that they did during that time. The great success of it was that it's what we call a soldier-proof aircraft. It looks and feels robust. It's got relatively moderate technology on board, and it's actually quite hard to break. This particular machine. I'm keeping my fingers crossed, of course, as I say that, but it really is quite tremendous in terms of its serviceability and its commitment to operations, both hot and high, dusty, wet, in all sorts of locations. It's been embarked on aircraft carriers and a variety of other maritime vessels. Before the advent of SS-11, of course, the pilots in the early days wouldn't have had any armament, but still were used in the close support observation roles up and down the front line of conflict. And without any radar or thermal imaging to actually help them in any way see over the hill, the pilot had to use his own eyeballs, and it took a significant amount of courage and ingenuity to relay that information then back to the commander on the ground. The aircraft are now embedded, this particular one, along with all the others on the static display today, they're embedded now within a charitable trust. And that is because, sadly, the MOD withdrew support for the Army Historic collection that we were running up until a few years ago. And now we are endeavouring to keep these venerable machines in the air through a volunteer pilot force, all made up of ex or currently serving Army Air Corps pilots. All the aircraft are kept at Middle Wallop. And of course, we would very much appreciate your support. It's perhaps as a connection with your family. It's been a pleasure today hearing so many family members talking about their parents and grandparents or uncles and aunts who worked in campaigns some 50 or 60 years ago. Again, Matt's now bringing it back into a reasonably medium hover, and you can almost feel that he's got a decent amount of power to play with in this scenario. The aircraft, of course, replaced the Sioux, which in turn replaced the Skeeter. The Sioux was an excellent observation helicopter, but sadly didn't have the power requirements to really make it appropriate at the front line. So that is Matt, they're just